Hey, good evening, everyone. Thank you. Well, good evening from Poland. Thank you again for joining us today. We're going to be talking about the humble beginnings of socialism as a ripoff of Christian religion. And joining me today is the one and the only Reason Dancers, and he's extremely reasonable. And I'm very grateful for his mentorship. I must say, he's been a huge asset to me, always challenging me and keeping me on the straight and narrow. And Thaddeus, welcome. Thank you.
Thank you for having me on. It's always a pleasure. Your research is unparalleled, and I'm excited to see what you've come up with about socialism.
Yeah, thanks. Hold on. Let me just change where my. Let me plug this in here rather. Okay, yeah, just to prevent echoes, because it's a bit too late for me to change my audio setup now. Yeah, so everyone can see this. So basically, guys, remember to think outside the whatever that thing on the screen is, right? So, if someone wants to turn it into a T-shirt, please go ahead. But yeah, we haven't given up on this particular topic, but I do feel it is time to explore other topics and give them the same treatment that I gave to Islam, a much different approach. So, yes, let me go to my presentation. And today we are discussing scientific Christianity. We're talking about the religion of atheist socialism. So the subtitle here is Secular Hubris, Atheist Fanatics, and a History of Failed Ideas. Any comments from you before I go any further, that is?
I do enjoy the cartoon there, where the painter is kind of painting this beautiful picture, oblivious to the fact he's about to be crushed by the picture he's painting.
Yeah, because socialism is a boot crushing the human face. Remember, this is from 1984, George Orwell. So that's the symbolism, the imagery. Yeah, so guys, today I'm going to go a little bit slower. I think, Thaddeus, do you think it will be, because people say I'm sort of like a flood of information. So should we try and go a little slower
Yes, that
today?
yeah, that sounds like a good plan.
Yeah, for me it's kind of obvious and easy to absorb, but yeah, um,
Yeah, but you also wrote the presentation,
that
so
is also
of
true. I
course it's
spent,
easy for you.
yeah, yeah. So guys, I've shown this before, but I'd like to just go through this formally, and there will be some overlap with some of the previous presentations. I do invite you to watch those; they're relevant. They're all connected. So atheism, socialism, and secular humanism are all tightly connected. Now, this is woke from 392 BC. Do understand that the ideas that you are seeing today from the woke community, from the socialist community, are ideas that have been around for more than 2,000 years. And in fact, they are pagan ideas. So, this is a play called The Congresswomen from 392 BC by Aristophanes. And it says, the women of the city, wearing beards and dressed in men's clothing, come to the assembly and they pass a resolution transferring all power in the state to women. This may seem familiar. You may recognize this as one of the common themes today. They use this power to introduce a series of measures, one of those being compulsory universal community property, which we would know today as socialism or communism, that of the abolition of private property. They also want economic equality. You may notice this is a common political rallying cry today. We will wear the same clothes. You might have seen this in communist China at one time, right? And this was a common refrain from the socialists from back in the day, that nobody would be different. We'd all be equal. In other words, we'd all be the same. There would be no individuality. We'd share the same food. We will communalize land and money and all property. And the man who is invisibly wealthy, he will deposit all his money in the fund. In other words, this is the appropriation of your land, your wealth, your money, all of your property. Notice they're going to pool all the women, creating a public hoard for the use of every man. So while this might not be, well, women voluntarily being, let's just say, sexually licentious, this is the state deciding that women should be sexually licentious. And then, of course, who's going to work the land and produce the food? Oh, the slaves. And all that man has to do then is, when the shades of night draw on, slip sleekly down to dinner. The state is not going to stint. Its hand is full and open, its heart is large. It'll stuff its menfolk free of charge, and issue them torches when dinner's done, and send them out to hunt for fun. And these last words, these words here are echoes of Marx. Marx said very much the same thing. Thaddeus, over to you.
Yeah, of course we see some differences. We no longer think of women as property that can just be pulled together for the benefit of the men. But nonetheless, you do see the same kind of lack of sexual morality. That it's all about free love. It's all about who needs a traditional family. You can just have as many sexual partners as you desire in this new atheist utopia that the political left is building.
Correct. And notice, children will trace their descent from all the men who might have begot them. In other words, children will not know who their fathers are. So children will be fatherless. We now have this utopia today, and it is, don't forget that the majority of men in prison are fatherless. So the chances of your child going to prison if he's fatherless is far greater than if he comes from a stable family. So do understand the parallels. This is pagan thinking, and we are going back towards pagan thinking, or being pushed in that direction. Communism.
Yeah, it's been argued.
Sorry?
It's been argued that the lack of responsible fathers is one of the main problems of modern society. That men just spread their seed, if you will, and then they don't take any responsibility for their children, and it's led to the unraveling of society. One consequence of which, as you pointed out, is people getting involved in crime. People, and fairness to the people doing such, in many cases they don't have a lot of choice because they're growing up in such a broken situation that they need money, and they don't have any skills and any and to be clear, by skills I'm referring primarily to social skills, to the stability that a family provides, and thus they feel that that's their only option. Of course, it's not really, but you can see why people would feel that way. So it's been argued that the lack of responsible fathers is one of the main causes of the social unrest we see today.
Fair points. And then Marian Bruheim says, and the children won't know who their spouses, and they won't know who their spouses are, whether they're a cousin or a sibling. And the children won't know who their siblings are either. So this is very similar to something that a certain woman who tried to be president said. It takes a village to raise a child. To which what's his name? Tom. Good grief. He'll come up in a moment. But she said it takes a village to raise a child. Apparently, an African proverb. To which a certain scholar stated, and it takes a village idiot to believe that. So it takes a family to raise a child. Okay, so yeah, these are all relevant threads we'll tie together. So what is this communism we all hear about? So certainly, communism is the end state. It is the Garden of Eden. Socialism is the vehicle. Socialism is the tool that shapes society and takes you to the end state, which is communism, where the state withers away. This is the Marxist equivalent, or the socialist equivalent, of the Garden of Eden. However, the word communism, interestingly, comes from Latin communis, common or universal. The word Catholic is from Latin Catholicus, coming via the Greek katholikos, also meaning universal. Because communism is a competitor to Christianity. It was a direct ripoff of Catholicism to become a replacement religion for mankind. I should note that the first use of the term Catholic Church, literally meaning the universal church, was by the church father Saint Ignatius of Antioch. Apparently he was a Baptist or a Presbyterian, I'm not sure which, in his letter to the Smyrnians in 110 AD. All right, now let's have a look at a man called Lenin. He wrote a book called Religion in 1905. I will make a link in the description later. I did forget, but I did a preview of this talk a few days ago. You will find a link there. Atheism is a natural and inseparable part of Marxism. of the theory and practice of scientific socialism. Thaddeus, your thoughts?
Yeah, well, the atheist, and we saw an example of this yesterday, actually. They'll come in and they'll say that atheism isn't a belief, it's just lack of belief in a God. Well, even if we grant that, which the dictionary doesn't grant, but we'll let the atheists have their own dictionary. But even if we grant that, in practice, the atheist is always going to believe things. They're still a human being. They're going to believe things, and they're going to end up embracing something like secular humanism, communism, Marxism. That's generally where atheism leads you. And Lenin understood that. He's saying that there is no Marxism without atheism. Atheism is the natural precursor to Marxism.
Yeah, so very well said. That was actually really profoundly said. It's the natural precursor to this, to socialism. Remember, Marxism is one form of socialism. It's merely socialism was created before Marx. Marx simply created his particular interpretation of socialism. That's his particular denomination of the socialist religion. Marx, in fact, does say, and I will show later, Marx says communism begins where atheism begins. Those are Marx's words. So let's have a look at what else he says. Atheism is an integral part of Marxism. Consequently, the Marxist Party must carry on propaganda in favor of atheism. Religion is opium for the people. Now, this is from a much longer text, and even Marx's quote of religion is opium for the people is from a much longer quote, and we normally only see these few words. In the larger context, what they mean is that religion is a drug. When people are drugged out of their minds and they can't see reality because they are just too high to see clearly, religion is the drug that makes you high and blinds you to reality, blinds you to the truth. Unfortunately, they feel that religion then is evil, and their ideology is going to remove that drug. And you see, once you come off the drug of religion, you will then see reality. You will be no longer asleep. You will be woke. Any thoughts from you, Thaddeus?
Yeah, I mean, you nailed it there. The argument is that because of the pain in the world, that people find ways to cope, and one of those ways is religion. Thus, religion blocks people from seeing the pain in the world and prevents them from rebelling against the evil capitalist systems that are the actual source of their pain. So you get rid of religion, then people rebel against the capitalism and they bring in the socialist utopia.
Agreed. Also, on what you said earlier, that atheists will claim that they have no values or no beliefs, right? That atheism is a neutral state. Now, understand that being happy or being sad or being angry or being bored, those are not claims of truth. Those simply are. They simply are psychological states. For an atheist to claim he's not thinking of anything, that is a psychological state. It cannot hold truth. It does not have truth. It simply is. Only claims can hold truth value. A claim of 1 plus 1 is equal to 2 or 1 plus 1 is equal to 3. Only claims can have truth value. Now, if an atheist states that atheism is the truth, Christianity is false, that is a position, that is a truth claim. That is a claim which can be examined for truth. Now, understand that having a psychological state does not hold any truth. It doesn't hold any values or any position in any ideological position, nor does it propose an argument for or against anything. Therefore, it cannot, by definition, be true. It has no truth whatsoever. But the moment you take a position, the moment you have an argument for something, you have a position, you have taken a position by making a claim, now you have values. So they are either logically incoherent or they are taking a position which is by default not true. Would you agree, Thaddeus?
Yeah, I think that's really profoundly put there, actually, that when the atheist tries to claim that they don't have, that atheism isn't a belief system, that it's not a position, what they're really saying is this is beyond a fact. This is just something that is. It's no different than feeling happy. I feel that there's no God today, but maybe tomorrow I'll feel differently. So in their attempt to avoid defending their position, they've made their position meaningless.
Yes, right. So Lenin tells us our program necessarily includes the propaganda of atheism. Well, notice now twice he's mentioned the propaganda of atheism. The philosophical basis for Marxism, which is socialism, is absolutely atheistic and positively hostile to all religion. Now, the basis of this belief is atheism. You have to be an atheist to accept socialism, because socialism is absolutely hostile to religion, and it is by default atheistic. And I will briefly transition to his actual PDF, his book on the topic, which is religion. Do you have any comment before I go back onto this book?
Nope, go ahead.
Okay, so this is V.I. Lenin, Religion. Atheism is a natural and inseparable part of Marxism, of the theory and the practice of scientific socialism. So socialists are by default atheists. The criticism of religion is the beginning of all criticism, so it is founded on the opposition to Christianity. This analysis was accomplished with such completeness that the atheistic character of this philosophy was taken for granted. It is not an accident that the works of the great masters of atheism, of socialism, Marx, Engels, and Lenin, contain no complete and systematic statement of their proletarian atheism. It is not usual to talk of obvious facts. See, the great masters of atheism never laid out how their beliefs work. It was just assumed. Atheists today are doing the very same. Atheists today are taking their template directly from Marx, Lenin, and Engels. Your thoughts, that is?
Yeah, I think that the author of this paper or book has nailed it. That they just assume atheism is true, and just like Marx and Lenin, atheists today do the same thing. In fact, they argue strongly that atheism is the default position. We don't need to prove it. Everyone should believe in atheism because it's the default.
Correct. And
It's
that
like
is the
saying
Marxist
that the
position.
sun. It's like saying the sun is shining today. It's just so obvious. There's no need to defend it.
Yeah. And he says here that atheism is practically an accepted fact among European labor parties, which tells us that they are socialist. Right, let's have a look at one or two more of these notes. From the writings of Lenin, the following four principles stand out as the most important. Atheism is an integral part of Marxism. Therefore, the Marxist Party must carry on propaganda in favor of atheism. Atheists today carry on an intensive propaganda campaign in favor of atheism. I wonder if this would be Marxist inspired. I have called them communist stooges. I've called them the useful idiots of communism. And, well, this parallel is too, I think it's too close to be a coincidence. There is the demand for the complete separation of the church and the state, and the church and the school. This is significant. We're going to see that from the socialist anti-Christian crusade and how they've invaded the school to enforce their religious ideas. And they must win over the proletariat with propaganda in favor of atheism, which must grow. They must emancipate the toiling masses from religion using propaganda for atheism. There seems to be a very large emphasis on propaganda for atheism. Any comment that
Yeah, very interesting that the atheism is the obvious truth that they need to forcefully, or maybe forcefully is not the best word, but
subversively.
Yeah, subversively. There you go. Argue for that they need to. They can't argue for it directly. They can't support their position. They can't do it intellectually. But what they need to do instead is they need to come up with these subtle clues that everyone just believes in atheism. And isn't that what we see today in the Western media, the Western entertainment system? That it's just a background assumption that atheism is true.
Tell me something. Why would one believe that the religion of Lenin, Stalin, Mao, Pol Pot, North Korea, why would that be the best view for mankind, the best ideology, the solution to all mankind's problems? It's like saying that well, I mean, yeah, I think it's a fairly obvious question. Why would the view held by the worst genocidal leaders in history, be the best position to take. That is.
Yeah, I mean, it's very counter to basic logic, but then again, atheism isn't based on logic. It's based on assumption.
Yeah.
Uh, the atheist comes in, they say, uh, I'm assuming there's no God. They don't use those words, but they say, I'm assuming there is no God, and you have to prove otherwise. And then you offer some evidence, and they say, that's not proof. And you say, why? Because I said it's not proof.
Yeah. Well, their worldview automatically excludes religion as valid. So by default, they cannot look outside of that frame.
Yeah, they start with the definition that there is no God, and then and whatever evidence you provide, they say that doesn't prove God because there is no God.
Yeah. No. Kitsune says that everybody is born an atheist, but then they get corrupted into a false religion. So they are working on making them reverts. You know, they revert. You must revert to atheism. That's Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah theism. Yes. Okay. So let's have a look at some additional words. Now, this is between the American Humanist Association and Lenin. One of the most important tasks of the Cultural Revolution affecting the wide masses is the task of systematically and unswervingly combating religion, the opium of the people. That is from Lenin, combating religion. Now, I do know that atheists are very, very devout in combating religion. The proletarian government must withdraw all state support from the church, which is the agency of the former ruling class. It must prevent all church interference in state-organized educational affairs. We will see, though, that these atheists are very, very active in embedding themselves and dictating educational affairs in the state. And we must ruthlessly suppress the counter-revolutionary activities of the ecclesiastical organizations. And this is exactly what the ACLU does. You pray over lunch in school, they will sue the school. You want to pray before a football match, they will sue the school. At the same time, the proletarian state, while granting liberty of worship, or thank you, and abolishing the privileged position of the formerly dominant religion, notice the formerly dominant religion. So it's being replaced by the new religion. Carries on anti-religious propaganda with all the means at its command, and reconstructs the whole of its educational work on the basis of scientific materialism. And we will see that the American Humanist Association and all of the humanist associations, which are by default atheists, are doing exactly no deviation whatsoever from what Lenin lays out here as his socialist plan.
Yeah, it's very fascinating how these atheists who have no belief system whatsoever support in huge numbers and attend conferences by atheists apparently telling them nothing, saying no positions. They have atheist festivals and conferences where they invite in speakers to apparently say nothing since they have no position. They millions of people subscribe to their YouTube channels, which apparently spend all their time talking about nothing. Since atheists have no beliefs.
Well, clearly it is a political religion. So, notice here, biologist Richard Dawkins launches into a full-on appeal for atheists to aggressively fight the incursion of religion into politics and education. We must prevent all church interference in state-organized educational affairs. That's the words of Lenin. We must aggressively fight the incursion of religion into politics and education. Others wondered whether Dawkins' strident approach could do more harm than good. Well, we know how it ended up in Soviet Russia. Dawkins says there is no room for a God in the world as he sees it, and he believes atheists should be forceful in opposing religion. That's what Lenin said too. Just by sheer coincidence, I don't doubt. So, yeah. So I think we see the parallel there. I think that's pretty clear, right, Thaddeus?
Yeah, absolutely. As far as I know, Dawkins doesn't identify as a communist, yet he's using the exact same language, kind of proving Lenin right, that atheism is the precursor to communism, that they're not exactly one and the same, but one always leads to the other.
Yeah, so exactly. XYZ says removal of the Pledge of Allegiance in U.S. public schools was the beginning. Yes. Look, the fight's not over yet. So let's look at the great masters of atheism. These are two photos of Lenin, and this one is Engels. The claim that atheism is the default position of atheists is the Leninist Marxist position. the criticism of religion is the beginning of all criticism, as we said, and the works, so they contain, it is not usual to talk of obvious facts, that atheism is obvious, right? So they don't need to explain themselves. We are gods, just believe it, bigot, right? Now, sorry, here we go. Thomas Sowell, I was thinking of, Thomas Sowell was the one who said, and it takes a village idiot to believe that. So Hillary Clinton said it takes a village to raise a child. No, it takes a family. And he said it takes a village idiot to believe that. The political vision of the left, including socialism, has failed. And we know this after countless experiments over a century, over more than a century. This has only led leftist intellectuals to evade and denigrate empirical evidence. And when the world fails to conform to their vision, then it seems obvious to the ideologues that it is not, that it is the world that is wrong, not their vision that is unrealistic. Now again, so I'm going to repeat some material from before. This is Voltaire. Whatever you do, crush the loathsome thing and love those who love you, which is exactly the words of Allah in the Bible. Allah only loves those who love him first. And then Thaddeus, you want to continue and tell us more about this?
Yeah, well, real quick before reading Jesus' statement here, I want to comment on this line, but this has only led leftist intellectuals to evade and denigrate empirical evidence, because we saw this yesterday when an atheist came in, he said we had the wrong definition of atheism. And then Lloyd showed him a dozen or more sources.
About 20.
About 20 sources giving the definition of atheism. And his response was, I don't have to believe those dictionaries, or I don't care what your encyclopedia has to say. In other words, evidence doesn't matter. All that matters is my opinion. I define atheism the way I want to define it, and if you disagree with my definition, then you're a stupid idiot, because that's what he was also saying, is that we had no clue what we were talking about. And we were, since we didn't even know the definition of atheism, we couldn't possibly have anything meaningful to say about it.
Yeah, so I provided about 20 different definitions on those. So you can see I went down this page, you can see here. And I had different scholars, different university professors, different dictionaries and encyclopedias, all of them, which I showed him and I said, okay, fine. Here we've got a whole bunch, okay? So strong disbelief in the existence of God, characterized by disbelief in the existence of. So I showed him a bunch of these and he refused to accept any of them. And they do claim to be based on science, reason, information, facts. Well, I specifically took time some months ago and I went through every single definition of atheism that I could find from every dictionary and from every encyclopedia and from every scholar that has written a work on the topic. And I collected a couple dozen, at least maybe 30 of them. And they all said what we said. And this guy just rejected them out of hand. That is not reasonable. That is someone who has turned his back on reason.
Yeah, and it's just like our Muslim friends who come in and they say that the Quran doesn't allow for prepubescent sex, and we say, based on what evidence? And they don't have any. And then we show them Muslim scholar after Muslim scholar who disagrees, and they say, I don't care what any of the scholars say. I know what the Quran means. And of course, they can't provide any evidence that they're correct, just like our atheist friends who can't provide any evidence for their belief, and thus they just assert it.
Abduls with intellectual pretensions.
Yeah, I find as Lloyd goes through this presentation that the main difference between a Muslim and an atheist is the amount of arrogance. The atheist is very arrogant about their position, but in the end, it's supported by about the same evidence as the Muslim position, that is none.
Yeah.
So getting back to the presentation here, Jesus said, if you love those who love you, what credit is that to you? Even sinners love those who love them. And if you do good to those who are good to you, what credit is that to you? Even sinners do that. So the highest aim of an atheist here is to be as good as a sinner, apparently.
Yeah, this is their philosophy. And when he says crush the loathsome thing, he is referring specifically to the church and Christianity. That is Voltaire's position. So now let's have a look. Voltaire, the inbreeder, calls to crush Christianity. So he's famous for apparently stating, "Écrasez l'infâme," crushed the loathsome thing, referring to the Roman Catholic Church. It's usually translated, well, in many sources, translated as the infamous, but then other sources use loathsome, right? So he says, crush the loathsome thing. That's his battle cry. It was a fiery expression of his love of men, of liberty, of enlightenment, and of progress, because he is regarded in France as the premier Enlightenment philosopher, possibly alongside Rousseau. Now, the thing in question that he's really wanting to crush is superstition, meaning Christianity. Voltaire was against religion, specifically the Catholic Church, and his writings are anti-Jewish too. In fact, you may want to read up his writings on black people. Oh man, I was surprised. Oh wow. Okay. However, this is all very much whitewashing propaganda, right? So when people followed his ideas and implemented them, this led to vicious, violent bloodshed. So notice many sources will tell you that Voltaire was a deist. In other words, he saw godlessness. Well, a deist is someone who believes in there's a God who created the universe and then fell asleep, dropped into a coma, and hasn't been seen since. Right? So on the seventh day, he rested and never woke up. Right? So now they claim he was a deist, but he saw godlessness, though, as weakening the sacred bonds of society. He saw utility in religion, in maintaining social cohesion, and he said if God did not exist, it would be necessary to invent him. He's not referring to the Christian God. He's referring to having a God that allows you to provide social control of some nature. Now the question is, what kind of God did the atheist and deist socialists invent? Your thoughts, that is.
Yeah, well, I think that a deist usually is probably someone who looks at the evidence and they see the organization of the universe. You know, I'm not necessarily saying Voltaire. I don't know his personal opinion, obviously, but generally a deist, I think, is probably someone who looks at the universe. They see how organized it is. They see that everything seems to have a purpose, a design. So they look at the evidence and they say there must be a God, but they don't want a God controlling their lives. They don't want a God who speaks to the world and provides moral guidance. So they say, yeah, God must have created this universe, but that's all we know. We don't know anything else. So we can still live as if there is no God. So I think that, you know, being a deist or being an atheist, I think the deist is just accepting that their evidence does suggest there is a God, but they still don't want to accept that there is a God that actually matters.
Yeah, that's fair enough. There's good reason for that. We'll get into that another time as to why they want that particular conception of a God. But then this inbreeder, sorry, says the following: "There is no God, but don't tell that to my servant, lest he murder me at night." Strange statement for a deist telling us that he's an atheist and that there is no God. But we need a moral God to prevent his servants from killing him. A little bit of a hypocrite, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I think so. That, you know, he's proposing or suggesting that he believes there is a God, while privately saying, yeah, there is no God. Just don't tell anyone that, because without a God to make them behave, they won't, and they might kill me, and I don't want to die. So let's just pretend there's a God for the benefit of society.
Right. So do understand that this leads to a broader point. We're not going to flesh it out here, but atheists have long been using religion as a means of social control. That they've used the institution of religion, stripped of its deity, but they realize it as utility. So they've used it, they've abased it, and used it for its utility to control people. So do understand that they do realize that religion actually has utility. So while they still want to crush it, they've always been forced to maintain some semblance of religion for the purposes of providing people some kind of means of seeing purpose in the world, of preventing despair, or maintaining the social control that religion had actually provided. So, notice, though, he was a serial womanizer. His most famous affair was with a married woman, Emily de Châtelet. Right? He was banging his own niece, Marie-Louise Mignon. So he was guilty of incest. And yeah, man, you got to read. He harbored some egregiously racist ideas. Oh my golly. got to read through some of the stuff he said. It is fascinating. It's not, yeah, not the forum for it here now, but man, this guy had some things to say. Enlightened man that he was. Good grief. Okay, so scientific morality. So dehumanization. Science is not a moral system. It measures or tests the material. Now, Islam claims to be Abrahamic. Atheists claim to be scientific. Richard Dawkins said that belief in anything that cannot be scientifically proven, i.e. faith, is one of the world's great evils. Now, will Dawkins declare secular humanism to be evil if they cannot prove their statements, or atheists, because they cannot prove their statements? Well, he's an atheist himself, right? So now notice that he says it is evil. Now, of course, if it's evil, then they need to wipe it out. If it's one of the great evils, it needs to be destroyed. Yet Dawkins contradicts himself because he does not believe in evil. He says there is at bottom no design, no purpose, no evil, no good, nothing but pitiless indifference. So there's no God, there is no punishment, there is no justice. Therefore, you can do anything, and there is no consequence. This means that the door's open for you to do anything, and there is no consequences whatsoever morally. And yet they claim to be moral. That is?
Yeah, this is one of the dilemmas of atheism. They want to say that religion is evil, and then they also want to say there is no such thing as evil. It's a walking contradiction, as people sometimes put it, that atheists are people who believe there is no God and are very angry at him. And that's what we see. You know, we see atheists, especially today, their primary argument tends to be that the God of the Bible is evil and immoral, and then they turn around and say there is no such thing as evil or immorality. Very strange behavior from rational, enlightened people who only go with the evidence.
Yeah, fair enough. I just need to double check which slide. Okay, slide 16, we're in slide 9, so this is where the whole history takes off, but I'm just doing the preamble. Notice, though, that Dawkins claims there is virtue in having no virtues or values, because atheism has no beliefs, has no values. So there are no values, but yet his values are good values. So this is logically incoherent. It makes no sense. They need to decide. Now, he believes that free will does not exist, that actions are determinist. In other words, you have no free will, therefore you're not responsible. Now, do understand, if you have no free will, you did not choose to do something, therefore you have no moral responsibility. Yet, how can you have moral responsibility if you have no free will? And how can you blame people for having religious beliefs if their actions are deterministic? If their actions are simply the result of social forces or atoms banging together, like the, you know, like blood vessels and the atoms of your brain just banging together, and you voila. So again, that is utterly logically incoherent. That is.
Nafid said something very enlightened here. He said, "Look, like atheists also have their own taqiyya." And
Yes.
that's what Dawkins is doing, right? He's denying his core belief that there is no evil in order to propagate his belief by asserting that the Christianity, religion in general, is evil.
Correct. And then also, what is their science? Yes, yeah. So that is a genuinely good question. What is their science? So understand that their philosophy starts in the 5th century BC. It is based on sophistry. It comes from a sophist. And this philosopher who created this idea, now look, this idea goes through, it molds itself. There's a different kind of humanism that goes into, I think we go to just before, like around the time of the Reformation. But this is not them, let's say. We're looking at this pagan who develops this idea that there are no objective values. There's no objective truth. That what is the most persuasive is what is true. What I can persuade you of using rhetoric is true. So this is the ultimate philosophical basis, which means that it is identical to Islam, because a madhab is not a school of law. Fiqh is law. Fiqh is jurisprudence. A madhab is a school of persuasion, and the 4 madhabs were chosen because those 4 scholars were the most persuasive. Therefore, it is based on sophistry. The sophist being called Protagoras. That is, you're nodding your head?
Well, a very interesting parallel just occurred to me. that in Islam, truth is based on the consensus of the scholars. However, that's exactly how science works. We're told that there's objective scientific fact, but actually, scientific theory is elevated to fact status based on a consensus of scientists.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So there's certain overlaps here because they both come from the same logical framework or illogical framework. So how are people to be blamed for faith when molecules caused it? If it's determinist, if you had no free will, it's simply atoms smashed together and bang, you had these thoughts. You are simply a meat robot and you have no free will. You have no decision-making capability. Now, so let's look at the logical outcome of science defining morality. And there's a lot. I've been doing a lot of digging. You have no idea the hours I put in. And yes, guys, please, make it like the like button is Aisha and you are Muhammad, okay? And hit that thing, right? So, so please do like, do share. Do like and Sharia. Okay, so thank you. Okay, so there's a lot to be said about this. I'm busy working on a great deal of information that looks at the crimes of science and the crimes of scientists, of the falsification of science, of fraudulent science, and there's a lot of it. But of course, secular humanists and atheists constantly worship science. They kneel at the altar of science, and yet these simply are just scientists. And there's a lot to be said here about the crimes of science. But let's have a look at this guy. You might need a shower after listening to Yuval Noah Harari speak, because that's how I feel when I listen to this man speak. However, human rights are not real, but don't tell anyone. There is no God, but don't tell anyone. Human rights are subjective. We all like to think that individual humans are important. Of course, the implication here is that individual humans are not important. The concept of individual humans being important is based on Christianity, because we are made in the image of God. Every human is unique. As Yuval points out, there's nothing scientifically special about any individual human. Apparently, our modern prioritization of the individual is a leftover. In other words, this is stale leftovers from last week's meal from the Christian concept of souls. So there are logical and moral and legal implications based on this. And this is no different to how the Stalinists would simply say, we need you to go and kill 50,000 enemies of the state. They killed people on the basis of a quota for no reason. Of how they would slaughter millions because they were not people. They had no scientific value. Don't forget, Nazism was scientific. Socialism is scientific. Stalinism was scientific. Marxism was scientific. Voltaire said about God that there is no God, but don't tell that to my servant lest he murder me at night. So understand, this is what science makes of you. It makes you worthless. It dehumanizes you. And dehumanization is one step short of genocide. Thaddeus.
Yeah, I mean, this is absolutely the logical conclusion of atheism. If there is no God imparting values on human beings, if we're just the product of blind chance, then it's absolutely true that we have no special purpose. We have no intrinsic value. One human being is no different than one rhinoceros or any other animal that you may choose. And therefore, there is nothing wrong with annihilating another human being, destroying another human being, because they have no intrinsic value.
Yeah. He says Homo sapiens has no natural rights. Now, don't forget, Thomas Jefferson, in fact, the founding father, stated that your rights come from God and they are inalienable. And he's saying, nope, you got no rights. Thanks. I have because I'm part of the elite, but not for you. Sorry.
Yeah, the only right you get is from being in power and holding a position where you can enforce your will on other people. It's not a right, but it's a privilege, perhaps would be better, that you have the privilege of not being destroyed because you are the smartest or the luckiest or the most well-connected, however you want to say that you rose to power, but you're in power now. You have the privilege of having a value in a sense. The other people, they don't have that privilege. They're dispensable. You can get rid of them if they're in your way.
Yeah, and that's how it worked under communism. So now let's have a quick run through this. Some of you will have seen this before. Of course, who wrote these poems? Worlds I would destroy forever. Since I can create no world, since my call they notice never, no one notices me, right? Coursing dumb in magic worlds. So he's, I don't know, there's some kind of magic here, and he's going to destroy worlds with his magic. Heaven I have forfeited, I know it full well. My soul, once true to God, is chosen for hell. So these two poems are Feelings from 1836 and The Pale Maiden, 1837. And then he says, I plunge my black saber, my blood black saber, into your soul. It leaps to the brain from hell's black mists. With Satan I have struck my deal. He chalks the signs, he beats time for me. I play the death march, fast and free. The Fiddler, 1837. For those of you who are not familiar with this, who have not seen this before, the author of these poems, which basically are satanic in essence, is this guy, Karl Marx, who seems to have, at least within his imagery, has struck a deal with Satan. Any comment before I go on, Thaddeus?
Yeah, I mean, even if we give this the most generous interpretation, that he doesn't literally want to worship Satan, that he is just using highly charged language. Even if we give that the most generous interpretation possible, we can see that he understood that his beliefs were anti-religious, anti-Christian, that they were against the Christian conception of God, and thus were in line with what Christians believe about Satan. So even if he didn't believe in Satan himself, he understands that his arguments are in line with what Christians would call satanic.
Yes, correct. Someone always asks, was he a Jew? So look, someone mentioned something yesterday, and I guess I hope the slower pace is actually better for you, because I'm trying to go a little slower to give people more time to absorb what is going on here, because I tend to go through this. I tend to listen to YouTube at 1.75, and I get through a lot of material, and I take notes. I am OCD when it comes to taking notes. You'd be amazed the size of my notes database, but hopefully everyone says I need to slow down. So, was he a Jew? No. Apparently his grandfather was a Jew. His parents were, I believe, Protestant Christians, although he obviously rejected Christianity and decided to go the satanic route. And in fact, his whole philosophy is specifically anti-Christian. So, now briefly, Marx had begun to lay the theoretical and what he believed were the scientific foundations of communism. Communism is a form of socialism. Remember, Marxism is a form of socialism, which is a scientific ideology. It was religion, and in fact, it was religion that ripped off Christianity, so it was scientific Christianity. So it's atheist, scientific Christianity. So Christianity, less divinity, less Jesus. And in the German ideology written in 1846 and later in Das Kapital, he had three main aspects. A materialist conception of history. Everything is deterministic. Everything is unavoidable. It's simply just how things were. There's no free will. A critique of capitalism and a revolutionary jihad to overthrow capitalism and its replacement by communism. Jihad is just revolution, right? The French Revolution was their jihad to bring socialism. The Islamic jihad is their revolution to bring the caliphate. So Marx's vision of communist society is intentionally vague. Unlike earlier utopian socialists, right? There were utopian socialists, we'll meet them later, who Marx and Engels derided as unscientific and impractical, including the founder of socialism, of modern socialism, and of course of Christian socialism, Henri de Saint-Simon and Charles Fourier and Robert Owen. Marx did not produce detailed blueprints for a future society. Marx provided no information on how communism would look. He wrote about socialism, and communism would somehow take care of itself. He wanted public education, which is now commonplace in the West, a graduated income tax, which is now also common, and public ownership of the major means of production and distribution of goods and services according to the principle from each according to his ability to each according to his needs. Of course, he never quite defined exactly how we measure that, but this would be termed utilitarianism. This is very much based on the whole utilitarian principle, which is, we will see it's very much satanic and very much socialist. Marx believed that institutions of a future communist society should be designed and decided democratically by the people living in it. It was not his task, he said, to write recipes for the kitchens of the future. So the communist society would somehow come into being, just as the state would wither away and then the communist state would form. And he had no idea. He could not prove it. He provided no proof. He provided no template. So therefore, is Dawkins going to come out and say, okay, well, this atheist was evil? I hope so, because this man could not prove his statements. Although Marx was reluctant to write these recipes, his followers were not. And of course, Engels decided he was going to go even a step further. Engels was even more influential in expanding and exegeting these ideas. Any comment, Thaddeus, before I go on?
Well, perhaps we could say that Marx is the Quran of communism, and then, even though he's perfectly clear, no one really quite understands what he means. So they have to come up with the tafsir and the hadith that the other authors supply us to explain what Marx really meant.
That is a very, very good analogy. And yes, of the Marx brothers, he was most definitely the worst. So now Marx began the introduction to his 1843 critique of Hegel's philosophy of law by claiming that criticism of religion is the premise of all criticism. And he says that man makes religion. Man must create religion, right? So he wanted to create his own religion, right? Religion doesn't make man. He said man makes religion. So he saw the Superman in the fantastic reality of heaven, but he found no more than a reflection of himself. So he created socialism where man is the highest expression of the universe. And therefore man must be remade in the image of man, of Marxist man, the perfect Marxist Superman. And the abolition of religion as the illusory happiness of the people is required for their real happiness. So we must abolish religion to find their real happiness. Didn't Dawkins say something similar? Don't atheists say the same?
He did.
Yeah.
He did. They do.
And we've got a guy called John Rendell who came on and made some comments on my YouTube recently, and he stated, okay, I am my own God. We are here to unlearn the teachings of the church, the state, and our educational system. We are here to drink beer. We are here to kill war. The 20th century was the atheist government century. It was the most vicious century in history. It killed more people than the last 2,000 years in total. So, yeah. So, yes, so this is what they're apparently here to do. So, he's his own God. Well, if you're your own God, well, people should just believe you, right? Because what proof do you need to support your claims? So, yeah, man become God. Gramsci.
Yeah, and I think
sorry?
I think he doesn't need any proof, right? Because he's his own God, as you said. And that's why he can make assertions like atheism it will end war when the facts say the exact opposite.
Yeah, the facts do say completely the opposite. Samuel Bass says, I don't follow or am required to follow, live up to Marx's ideas as an atheist whatsoever. No, there might not be a requirement, but your ideals line up with Marxist ideals. They line up with Stalin's ideals. They line up with exactly the same ideals as the major socialist governments who were vehemently anti-Christian. So those ideals, unfortunately, overlap greatly. So Gramsci, cultural Marxist architect, socialism is precisely the religion that must overwhelm Christianity. Oh my. In the new order, socialism will triumph by first capturing the culture via infiltration of schools, universities, churches, and the media by transforming the consciousness of society. Thaddeus.
Yeah, I think that, although he was not a prophet after Muhammad, he was very prophetic here. And this has actually happened. Well, first of all, notice that he's declaring that socialism is a religion, that it's intended to be a replacement for Christianity. It's not just a neutral belief or lack of belief, but rather it's precisely a religion. It's a replacement for Christianity. And this is exactly what has happened, that through the education system, primarily, secondarily through the media, and occasionally even through churches, liberal Christian churches, that socialism is triumphs as the ideal, that we should just take all the wealth of those evil rich people and distribute it around. That the reason that your life is difficult is because some rich person is oppressing you. And we are taught that sometimes explicitly and always implicitly through the media, through the school system. We're taught that we all can be whatever we want to be if as long as we try really hard and no one gets in our way.
Yeah, fair enough. And we do need to note that Gramsci is foundational to what we call intersectionality or intersectional theory, as well as cultural Marxism. His theory dismantles existing culture, so it is toxic and corrosive. It does so by ideological subversion and opposition. Now, do note that the term opposer, the Hebrew word opposer, we know as the word Satan. Satan is the opposer. And it challenges and opposes the legitimacy of existing institutions like family. It sees family as a false institution. Marx was vehemently against the nuclear family, and also religion, and also political power. It seeks to undermine and destroy this. Saul Alinsky, very interesting, also a socialist, also an atheist, describes the modus operandi in Rules for Radicals, where he says that this is for those who want to change the world from what it is to what they believe it should be. This is their vision. The Prince was written by Machiavelli, another atheist, for the haves on how to hold power. Rules for Radicals written for the have-nots on how to take it away. Do note that his book, Rules for Radicals, Saul Alinsky's book, has a deep and meaningful personal dedication to Satan. He says this is for Lucifer, or he expresses his admiration for Lucifer as the first radical, the man who broke away from God and founded his own empire. So, yeah, just bear that in mind. And now,
yeah, I think it's very interesting that the undermining of the family is always part of this. And, it doesn't seem like it should be related, right? Socialism's an economic system, supposedly, but the family is always a key aspect of this. And we see this today as well from the political left, that they want to redefine what family is. If you dare say that the ideal family is a mother, father, and children, obviously that can't always be the case because, people will die and other things happen. But if you dare to say that that's the ideal, then you're a horrible racist bigot who has no idea what you're talking about. A family can be anything, it can be any configuration. It can be people who are not biologically or legally related to each other. It can be multiple mothers and no father. It can be multiple fathers and no mother. It can be a single parent who is that way by choice, that they don't want to have, that they never desired to have a partner. It can be anything. A family is whatever you make it out to be. Yeah. And it's very interesting that that's a key aspect of undoing the existing social order, that it's not just about changing the economic system. It's about undoing everything that Christian values have stood for.
Yeah, it is fundamentally anti-Christian. And thank you very much, Kitsune. He says, Marx surely led by example regarding family life. And yes, he did. I mean, Voltaire had a horrible family life. And if you go into the lives of many of these people, you'll find that they aren't exactly examples. Now, the confession of communist faith. Give a little thought to the confession of faith. I think we would do best to abandon the catechetical form and call the thing Communist Manifesto. This is in letter from Engels to Marx on 24th November 1847. So he says, Marx, please don't call the document the Communist Confession of Faith. Call it the Communist Manifesto, because catechetical means religious instruction given in preparation for Christian baptism or confirmation, a religious teaching by means of questions and answers, because Marx wrote it as a religious text. Your thoughts, Thaddeus, before I continue?
Yeah, what Engels is saying to Marx is he's saying, dude, you're saying the quiet part out loud. Don't do that. People aren't supposed to know that this is a religion. They're not supposed to know that this is getting rid of religion. If you say that out loud, they'll reject it. But if we're quiet about it, they might not realize what's going on here.
Yeah. No, good comments, guys, that I'm seeing. Some really good comments. Yeah, so basically we've got just approximately 1 hour. So how long should we go, Thaddeus? I'll leave it up to the audience. I don't want to go more than another 30 minutes. What do you think we should do? Should we pick this up later or continue for a little bit?
You would know best where to break the presentation. It looks like you're perhaps about a third of the way through, so either somewhere around here or somewhere around half would be fine by me.
Okay, yeah, that sounds good. Let's go for a little bit. I'll let the audience decide, but I also want to make sure that it's not too long, that people coming along later don't find it's too lengthy to watch. So, this is from James Lindsay, himself a former Catholic, now atheist. Marxist communism is not an extension or logical conclusion of liberalism. It's a Gnostic mystery religion made of an inversion of Christianity, retooled into a form of magical alchemy. That's how you create the perfect. Remember, Marx had the idea of the perfect man, the communist man. So did the Nazis. They had the idea of the Übermensch. And of course, through alchemy, people want to do, through a spiritual alchemy, they want to become the perfect man. So this idea, this Gnostic idea has gone on for a long time. So it is an inversion of Christianity retooled into a form of magical alchemy, passing itself off as the science, because they always claim to be scientific, right? So now the origin of socialist religion. Let's have a look. This man is Claude-Henri de Louvois-Comte de Saint-Simon. My French is probably terrible, but he's Henry Saint-Simon. And he was born in 1760 in Paris and he died in 1825. So he created the term socialisme, and it's a term coined in the 1820s. It was created by French social theorist, this guy, Henry Saint-Simon, one of the chief founders of what he originally called Christian socialism. And in his major work, Nouveau Christianisme, or the New Christianity, in 1825, notice he died in 1825, so he proclaimed a brotherhood of man that must accompany the scientific organization of industry and society. So you must use science. I could sooner the Uber Abdul. Oh my god, no. Oh yeah. Yeah, guys, the like button is very lonely. Please keep smashing it. Thank you, guys. Now, Henry Saint-Simon was a nobleman who became a revolutionary, a businessman who theorized about abolishing private property. Marx wanted to abolish, in fact, all the socialists wanted to abolish private property. Since we saw 400 BC, they want to abolish private property. A man of high birth who died in misery and left the beginnings of a new science that he called social physiology. And later, thanks to this particular scholar and philosopher, Auguste Comte, was an outstanding disciple, they went on to create the science that they would call sociology. Sociology was their vehicle for getting socialist ideas into the universities and for building their socialist utopia. This Auguste Comte, interesting man. I've got several slides on him, but yeah, this guy had a huge impact. Notice the theory of the communists may be summed up in the single sentence, abolition of private property. Take away the heritage of a people and they are easily destroyed. Karl Marx, Communist Manifesto. I will note that I cannot find this phrase, take away the heritage of a people and they are easily destroyed. I'm having difficulty. This is commonly quoted, but I had great difficulty finding this last phrase. But the portion that says the theory of the communists may be summed up in the single sentence, abolition of private property, that is legit. So understand, they are socialists. Marx is just one flavor, one brand of socialism. And they want to take your money, they want to take your property. Now, he wants a technocracy, a scientific dictatorship. In his first published work in 1803, Letters of an Inhabitant of Geneva to his Contemporaries, Saint-Simon proposed that scientists must take the place of priests in the social order. Neil deGrasse Tyson, anyone? Right? This is technocracy. By 1808, he was impoverished, and the last 17 years of his life to live mainly on the generosities of his friends, echoes of Karl Marx. Your thoughts so far, Thaddeus?
I think that last line there is very interesting, that people who were unable to make it in the Industrial Revolution, the scientific takeover of the economic system, suddenly become socialists and suddenly think that we should redistribute wealth.
Yeah. I mean, you will have nothing and you will like it, but he had nothing and he didn't like it. So maybe a little bit of a hypocrite there. Among his many later publications was the 1814 On the Reorganization of European Society and Industry, written with Auguste Comte. So his religion had both political as well as industrial implications. In 1823, in a fit of despondency, he tried to kill himself with a pistol. He only succeeded in putting out one eye. Now we see a hint of fascism in the UN. As a thinker, he was deficient in clarity. That's according to Britannica, okay? But his influence on modern thought, especially in social sciences, this is in the universities, in sociology, is undeniable. He believed that science and technology would solve most of humanity's problems. Now, that is exactly what the secular humanists will tell you every day, whole day. He advocated an arrangement whereby businessmen and other industrial leaders would control society, so industry would enforce government policy. This is fascism. It's on the left. That is.
Yeah, that is that first statement. I had to chuckle as you were reading it because he was deficient in coherence, but he's very, very influential on modern thought. And both
Fair.
those statements are true, right? I mean, you got that from Britannica. That's not your opinion. That's what the encyclopedia says, which is based on the consensus of scholars. It says that no one could understand what he was saying, but they still adapted his ideas and made what we now call social science.
Yeah,
Just
crazy stuff.
amazing.
And Auguste Comte, who created sociology, man, the guy was not all there, okay? He was at least 4 sandwiches short of a picnic, okay? He was at least 5 bottles short of a six-pack, all right? So, yeah. And yeah, guys, yeah, please do subscribe. Hit the notification bell for live streams. Please do subscribe. And yeah, I've been spending a lot of time on this. I have a great deal of different material coming up. Deficient. Okay, now he also stated that the spiritual direction of society would be in the hands of scientists. The spiritual direction of society would be in the hands of scientists and engineers who would take the place occupied by the Roman Catholic Church. An industrialized state directed by modern science and one in which society would be organized for productive labor. Doesn't that sound a little bit like slavery? Organized for productive labor by the most capable men. We'll tell you what to do. So,
It does.
and then the aim of society would be to produce things useful to life. Utilitarianism. Again, the philosophy of utilitarianism. St. Simon also proposed that the states of Europe form an association to suppress war. Oh, echoes of the UN, echoes of the EU. So these thoughts come way back. These ideas had a profound influence on philosopher Auguste Comte, who worked with St. Simon until the two men argued and they split. In his best-known work, The New Christianity, socialism takes the form of a religion concerned with the plight of the poor. So they're very concerned with the plight of the poor. And he had never concerned himself with theology, but beginning with a belief in God, he tries to resolve Christianity into its essential elements, and he finally propounds this idea. Religion should guide the community towards the great aim of improving as quickly as possible the condition of the poorest class. This is the watchword of socialism, right? The workers must unite to improve their lot against the bourgeoisie. So the Christian socialism of the mid-19th century attempted to apply the social principles of Christianity to a modern industrial life. Got another 5 minutes. They advocated, amongst other things, that inheritance rights must be abolished, which is exactly what Marx wanted. And as we read there within this 392 BC play, so anyone with money would have to donate it to the state. And so that capital could leave the hands of self-seeking capitalists and be placed at society's disposal. It's a pagan idea. It's been around for 2,400 years. Your thoughts, that is? You got that smile on your face again.
Yeah, well, these two slides, I had many thoughts about this. One, it was echoing that poem that you had from 300 BC, where the slaves do all the labor. Whoa, very interesting. I thought that slavery had been abolished in modern society, but here we have the one of the founders of socialism saying that we need to organize. He's not using the word slavery, but as you point out, that's kind of what it sounds like, right? Organize people to be the most productive. We tell people what work they're going to do. Very, very interesting, but also echoing what we say today, that we need to redistribute the wealth from the those evil capitalists who have the hands of self-seeking capitalists. All the problems of society are, if it's not an atheist talking, it's not a radical atheist who thinks that the religion's the problem of everything, all the cause of all the problems of society. It's going to be The evil rich people are the problems of all society. They were seeking out their own wealth by enhancing society with the goods they produced. How dare they? We need to take all their wealth and only make things that benefit people, not things people want, but things that we know benefit them. Because, I mean, capitalism, whoever produces the things that the people most want wins, right? And socialism, the almighty, all intelligent leader who decides what people actually need decides what is produced.
Right. Yeah. This is. Yeah. So just to respond to Islam Mentira Verdad, I suggested if people wanted to unsubscribe to my channel, they could do it. Because look, I do say things that I realize are often controversial. I have made certain very blunt statements. You've seen the level of detail I go with my research. I am extremely detailed. I provide hundreds, I provide nearly 1,500 resources in my archive. I show exactly the sources I'm using. I do not hide my sources. And the statements that I make are based on evidence. So, and if someone's unhappy with the fact that I'm stating something that might slaughter one of their sacred cows, then if they're not happy with that, they don't have to watch. And if they want to unsubscribe, that is their prerogative. That's what I said. So I understand that what I say might not make people happy, but I do firmly believe that what I'm stating is the truth based on evidence that I can provide and evidence that I do provide. But to continue, yeah, sorry.
Well, real quick before you go on, that reminded me of the other thing I wanted to say. That atheist guy came in and he just left one comment, and I'm sure he's gone now. He left that hit and run that I don't have to believe what Marx said, but if you didn't tell him who the author of those last two slides were, he could have easily thought that was someone who he agrees with today, because it sounds exactly like what we're hearing from the political left, from atheists today, that everything that is at the foundation of socialism, Christian socialism, the religious system of socialism, is exactly what's being repeated today. So he can say all he wants. He doesn't have to follow what Marx says. He doesn't have to follow what anyone else says. He can make his own decisions, but he ends up saying the exact same thing. Atheists end up saying the exact same thing today.
Yeah, agreed. I agree. Yeah. No, it's there's no difference between the things that Dawkins says and the things that Stalin said or Lenin said. So, yeah. Now the term Christian socialism was then first appropriated by a group of British men, including Frederick Morris, novelist Charles Kingsley, John Malcolm Ludlow, etc., who founded a movement that took shape in England immediately after the failure of a particular blah blah blah. Their purpose was to vindicate for the kingdom of Christ its true authority over the realms of industry and trade, and for socialism its true character as the great Christian revolution of the 19th century. Thaddeus, I'll leave you to reply to that.
Well, they need to justify why they're the replacement for Christianity. So they say Christianity has failed. Christianity has not has not adequately taken care of those least advantaged in society, the poor and the downtrodden. So we need something else. Christianity, you had your chance. You did poorly. It's our chance now.
Yeah, and they're turning Christianity into a political religion. I know of another political religion. It starts with an I. Can't think of its name right now. And then, 4 years after Karl Marx characterized religion as the opiate for the people, Kingsley, probably unaware of Marx's phrase, asserted that the Bible had been wrongly used as an opium dose for keeping beasts of burden patient while they were being overloaded, and as a mere book to keep the poor in order. So Christianity now becomes the thing that is suppressing the poor, that is denying society's growth, denying people their status as dignified people. And so, yes, they must recapture Christ, and they must repurpose him, reuse him. So they must, in other words, create a new religion, right? So these are the Mohammeds of 1848.
It's a shame that Marx's quote is the famous one, because this quote says the same thing in a much clearer language. An opium dose for keeping beasts of burden patient while they were being overloaded. That's what Marx means. He means that religion has blinded people to their own plight, that it prevents them from realizing they're being oppressed. And here Kingsley says it much more plainly. Such a shame that this isn't the famous quote.
In fact, yeah, no, when you read Marx's quote in full, that sentence is the opium of the people, is like the final sentence of a couple of paragraphs where Marx lays it out. And they never play the previous paragraphs. I know I didn't either, but I was trying to show Lenin's views on it and this guy. And when you read Marx's view, it's also much more detailed. And you don't see the first part. You just see that little snippet to hide what it actually means. Adam Seeker, hey, thank you, man. Wow, hey, Adam is in the chat, guys. Thank you very much. And now, finally, actually, you know what? I'm going to skip this one. We're going to end off very, very shortly, right? Now, this guy promoted technocracy, which is an organizational structure system of governance where decision makers are selected on the basis of technological knowledge. So the scientists are going to rule, and this is what they wanted. The socialists want this with their new religion. So it's religion where they worship science, and they want to exercise government authority on the basis of elitist knowledge. So their movement is an alternative form of socio-economic organization. So understand, they believed that this would take over the world, but then of course America came up as a major industrial power. Capitalism proved how it was uplifting people, making them wealthy, changing the world for the better. The ideas died out, and now they are back. Thank you, Thaddeus. Much appreciated. Yeah, so guys, hold on. I'm just going to skip ahead maybe to some interesting slides if I can find something which might be of interest to you guys. So for those who have not seen this, I will... So for those who have not seen this, I want to show you this. Now, we've spoken earlier of... I'll just end off here. This is at the very end of this presentation. I've shown this before, but understand that the humanism, socialism, claims to be scientific. They base themselves on Enlightenment principles. They are scientific. They claim to use reason. Now, let's have a look at the 7 fundamental tenets. Some of you will have seen this. We must strive to act with compassion and empathy towards all creatures in accordance with reason. The struggle for justice is ongoing, and the struggle for justice should prevail over laws and institutions. And beliefs should conform to one's best scientific understanding of the world, and we must never distort scientific facts. And compassion, wisdom, and justice must always prevail over the written or spoken word. Now, these sound really wonderful. However, these are the tenets, just, not of a secular humanist organization or an atheist organization, although they perfectly match those. Yes, Thaddeus?
But before you reveal that, I wanted to make a quick comment here. They use the word reason over and over again, right? Mm-hmm. And they say that we should act in accordance of reason. We should do what's scientific, blah, blah, blah. Which of these 7 principles come from science? Which of these 7 principles come from pure reason?
That is a
None
fair
of them,
question.
as near as I can tell.
Yeah, these are moral principles. From which absolute moral source do they compare themselves or use this as what's their moral authority? So, by the way, these are the 7 fundamental tenets of the Satanic Temple. Okay, so these are the 7 fundamental tenets of the Satanic Temple, which in no way conflict with anything said by secular humanism, which in no way conflict with anything that Marx would say or Lenin would say. You'll find they use exactly the same terminology, same phrases, the same thoughts. Right. So this is, just briefly to end off with, from Anton LaVey, if you look at his atheism, his Satanism is atheistic, right? It is a carnal religion. And they believe that all gods are fictitious and that ultimate importance is found in the self and pursuing self-interests, right? Now, they do claim that Satan is not a deity to venerate, but a metaphor, the ultimate adversary, the opposer of irrationality and religious beliefs. So religious beliefs are by default, within secular humanism, within socialism, any religious belief is by default irrational. It's by default incorrect. It is wrong. Secular humanism, from its founding, defined itself as in opposition to Christianity. It didn't have any positive beliefs, or rather, those took a backseat to their opposition to Christianity. And, of course, notice from the spokesperson of Lucian Greaves, I'll end here, from the Satanic Temple, It's not just that we're looking for disorder, chaos, and to undermine Western civilization. In fact, we're trying to endorse for Enlightenment values, bringing reason and respect for science into bettering the human condition. Thaddeus, last word to you.
Yeah, I mean, I think the same principle applies here when we're looking at Marx and his satanic poetry. You know, we give them the benefit of the doubt here. We'll take them at their word when they say that Satan is not a deity to venerate. They're not literally worshiping Satan, but they've chosen that metaphor very carefully. You know, they didn't just choose it at random that they are appealing to Satan. They know that their beliefs are anti-Christian. They know that their beliefs are diametrically opposed to Christianity. They can come in here and they can pretend that atheism is just a lack of beliefs all they want, but ultimately they know that really they're anti-Christian. They're not atheists, they're anti-Christians. They're anti-theists. And that is the reality of the situation. Any attempt to say otherwise is just a word game, and they know that deep down, which is why some atheists embrace saying that they're Satanists.
Sorry, my apologies. Kitsune said they aren't praying to Satan, but for Satan. Dude, you just won the internet today. That was hysterical. Yeah, they don't pray to, but for. Yeah, so Emma asks finally, is there an agenda for these talks? Okay, if you go through the recent talks I've done in the last 2 weeks, I spoke about the founding of the very first secular atheist state, which was the French Revolution, was the founding of the very first atheist state. And they ended up, of course, atheism is the religion of peace, as you well know. They ended up slaughtering well over 250,000 people. They were killing Catholic priests on sight. They killed anyone who protected Catholic priests. They murdered nuns. They shot people and buried them in shallow graves. And they claimed that they were doing this to prevent fanaticism in the name of reason. And of course, because the state had to be atheist and secular, because that's the only way that one can be scientific and reasonable. And they committed this genocide and slaughter. And then eventually, of course, that fell apart. And then, of course, they inspired others and they created a complete mess. And that was the start of early historical atheism. And then, of course, now I'm doing the foundations of socialism as religion. And once we finish socialism, which was founded specifically as an anti-Christian religion, a ripoff of Christianity, counterfeit Christianity, then we'll go into into secular humanism. Then we'll look at the founding of secular humanism as a religion. Understand, as a religion. Secular humanism is a religion. It's claimed to be a religion from the very start of its founding. So yeah, this is to have a look at the claims of atheists and to see if maybe they aren't exactly, if they're being a little bit like a bunch of Abduls, which they are. Spoiler alert. Thaddeus, last word, and then we'll call it a night, I think.
Well, yeah, to answer the other half of Emma's question, there's no specific plan to touch on liberation theology at the moment, but I would see the connection there. So that's definitely something that we can look into in a future presentation. And, it's not like Lloyd is just going to do this one presentation on atheism and then that's going to be the end of it, or this one presentation on socialism and then that'll be the end of it. So we can definitely put that on the put that down as something to look into.
Oh no, Adam Seeker says the issues the start of the movement versus today's so-called atheists are two different breeds. No, Adam, they are identical. Their statements, their words, their goals, their political and social goals have not differed. The intersection of these two between socialism and atheism would be secular humanism, where you can see it fully expressed. Because that really is the exegesis of their ideas from a social point of view and a religious point of view. But the words of Voltaire or the words of Rousseau or any of these other philosophers who founded, because they were founded upon these ideas of these Enlightenment philosophers, which are, within a Christian point of view, thoroughly satanic. And the ideas have not changed. The words might have changed, but the ideas and the intentions, the outcomes, they are all very, very much in alignment. Thunderous, anything from you?
Yeah,
Thaddeus, sorry.
if Adam has a chance to watch the previous presentations, we directly compared Dawkins' words to those of the founders of the atheism and communism, and they were almost word for word identical. We did this a couple of times, so uh, that I agree with Adam in principle that the modern atheist thinks they're doing something completely different. However, they end up saying the same things while saying, we don't agree with Marx at all. We just say the same things.
Yeah, or Kitsune, I would love to see you two with Islam critiqued. Um, Thaddeus.
Yeah, so Colin's a friend, but well, one, he really dislikes live streams, and two, he's very busy, and he said he doesn't have time to do that kind of thing. So I think it's unlikely. I'd love to do it, but I think that it's pretty unlikely.
Yeah, and then he also had a few words for me once, which weren't exactly, shall we say, complimentary. Let's just say he not very positive. So
But yeah, to put it in nice terms, he said he wasn't interested in Sharia.
it's politely said. Thank you very much. Yeah. Okay, so yeah, what is GL's channel? GL's? We got to get you two on GL's
God
channel.
logic, God
Oh, God
logic.
Logic. Yeah, I'd be happy to do that. Yeah. So, okay, so guys, I went a little longer than expected. I meant to go sort of an hour-ish, but we've gone a little longer, but we've gone slower than normal, slower than we typically would, and I hope that has been useful. Thaddeus, what did you think of the pace? Did we, oopsie, let's just go back here.
Yeah, I thought it was really good. Obviously the audience will ultimately decide what is best. But if you have feedback on the pace, let us know in the comments afterwards. And if people find the pace slow, they can easily speed up the presentation. And there's that handy 1.25, 1.5 button. But hopefully the slower pace allows people to absorb the material better
Mm.
because there is a lot going on here. There's a lot of material that people rarely, if ever, talk about. There's a lot to take and use in your conversations with atheists. Ask them why their ideals seem to exactly line up with the ideals of Lenin, the ideals of Marx, the ideals of Engels, and so forth.
Yeah, excellent. So, yes, so guys, thank you. I will call it a night here. Just follow this guy, Auguste Comte, who founded sociology, university sociology. He created his own socialist religion, and his ideas made their way into sociology. But yeah, you've got to these ideas go way back. They're not new. The atheist ideas of today are not new. They're at least 250 years old, but in fact, you can go back 500 years and you'll start to find the genesis of them. And in fact, you can go back to the pagan era of 2,500 years ago, and you'll find the very same ideas. So these ideas are not old. They just pop up every couple of hundred years and they cause a mess in society. So, guys, thank you very much. And thank you, Thaddeus, for joining me. So, guys, I will probably stream during the week. I don't know if Thaddeus is available during the week, so we might have to wait. I will not be able to stream the next 2 Saturdays for sure. But next Sunday I can stream, the next weekend not. But we will continue yesterday's series that we did on Thaddeus's channel. Please check his channel out, where we discussed the founding of atheism, modern atheism. Yeah, we will discuss that again next weekend, and yeah, we'll be in touch. So just please hit the like, subscribe, and the notification bell, and you'll see when I start doing the next thing. My next video may well be I just go through a list of the definitions of atheism from the major encyclopedias, major authors, major scholars on the topic, major dictionaries, just to show that, look, atheists seem to make up definitions like a bunch of Abduls. I mean, okay, thank you guys, and good night. Take care. Bye-bye. God bless.